The Christmas dinner table gleamed under the chandelier's glow, every utensil and plate positioned with obsessive precision. Mother's belief was simple: proper settings reflected a family's social status. At the head of this meticulously arranged battlefield of silverware and china, Sarah claimed her throne, to Dad's right. She wore a charcoal Armani blazer that looked like it could cost more than my entire month's salary at the warehouse. For the past 6 months, every family gathering had been a lecture hall for Sarah's entrepreneurial achievements, and tonight was no different. Her startup, TechFlow Solutions, had supposedly closed a Series B funding round, a phrase she wielded like a weapon, a badge of superiority in every conversation. She adjusted her designer watch with careful precision and carved into the prime rib with a slow, deliberate motion, preparing to deliver her victory speech. The due diligence process was brutal, she announced, her voice commanding attention. 3 months of investors dissecting every aspect of our business model, financial projections, technology architecture, competitive analysis, management credentials. Most startups collapse under that kind of scrutiny. Her eyes sparkled with pride as cousin Marcus leaned forward, admiration clear in his gaze. But TechFlow had survived. More than survived, it had triumphed. The lead investor called our AI integration platform revolutionary, Sarah said with a triumphant smile. They've never seen market penetration analytics like ours in the enterprise software space. Uncle Robert raised his glass with ceremonious gravity. To Sarah, he toasted, the first real entrepreneur this family has produced. The clink of crystal echoed around the room, everyone participating, everyone except me. I sat at the far corner, still in my polyester warehouse uniform, the embroidered name Dave above my breast pocket standing out awkwardly under the glow of the chandelier. Dad's paternal voice rang out, tinged with condescension. Dave should be taking notes. Maybe some wisdom will rub off on him through osmosis. Sarah set down her fork with theatrical precision. Actually, Dad, that comment perfectly illustrates something important I wanted to discuss tonight. The room fell silent. Even Mom paused mid-bite, sensing drama approaching. Sarah pulled out her phone, swiping to a slide deck that looked professionally designed, her confidence radiating. I've been analyzing our family's financial trajectory, she began. We need a more strategic approach to decision-making going forward. She displayed a polished slide titled Family Wealth Assessment Matrix, Q4 Analysis, emphasizing that as successful individuals, we should prioritize discussions that truly advance our collective economic potential. Uncle Robert nodded approvingly. Smart thinking. Time is money. The next slide revealed a color-coded bar graph ranking each family member by annual economic impact contribution. Uncle Robert's construction empire led the chart at $2.3 million in annual revenue. Dad's accounting practice followed at $1.8 million. Mom's real estate portfolio contributed $900,000. Marcus, recently promoted, generated $450,000. Each figure glimmered on the polished chart, a testament to professional success. And then, me. The laser pointer's red dot drifted to the bottom of the chart, $38,000 annual salary. Warehouse operations. No bonuses. No investments. No business ventures. Essentially, no measurable contribution. The room went silent. I focused on my dinner, savoring the perfectly cooked vegetables, as Sarah added quickly, everyone has value, but from a strategic standpoint, meetings should prioritize genuine business contributors. Cousin Jenny shifted uncomfortably. What exactly are you proposing? Sarah clicked to her final slide, optimized family governance structure. Starting next quarter, strategic sessions will be limited to contributors only. People who understand market dynamics, investment strategies, profit optimization, people who speak fluent business. She gestured around the table, all of us except me operating in professional environments. She looked directly at me for the first time that evening, pity and determination mixed in her gaze. No offense, Dave, but portfolio diversification, acquisition targets, IPO timing, these conversations would be over your head. I nodded calmly, returning my attention to my plate. Sarah smiled, satisfied that I understood my place. Dad chimed in, how will this work practically? Sarah explained that social gatherings would continue normally: birthdays, holidays, casual dinners, but strategic meetings, investment discussions, and wealth management sessions would become contributor exclusive. Mom asked about scheduling. Sarah proposed monthly meetings rotating between offices and homes, showing off TechFlow's HQ, labs, and proprietary algorithms. Topics would include pooled family investments, collaborative ventures, and profit sharing based on contribution. Dave, she added with what she thought was kindness, you're welcome to observe sometimes as informal business education. I replied quietly, I appreciate it. The rest of the evening unfolded as expected. Sarah detailed TechFlow's $40 million Series B funding, Fortune 500 pilot programs, AI algorithms, and projected revenue growth. Everyone listened in, or while I quietly observed, nodding occasionally. The final reveal: Sarah contemplated launching her own venture capital fund. Maybe $50 to $60 million initially, she said casually. Limited partners, pension funds, endowments, that's where the real money is. After dinner, I returned home to my modest apartment, took a long shower, and prepared my secure emails. I instructed my attorney and portfolio manager to terminate all funding agreements with TechFlow Solutions, $40 million withdrawn, effective immediately. Tomorrow, Sarah's empire would unravel. By morning, the phones rang incessantly, Sarah, panicked and crying, leaving frantic voicemails and texts. The legal termination had triggered chaos. Banks froze accounts, employees demanded explanations, investors vanished. Even Mom called, worried and confused. The story that had dazzled the family for 6 months, a glamorous, high-stakes tech empire, was about to collapse in real time. The morning sun filtered through my apartment window, but the warmth did little to soothe the chill that ran down my spine. My phone buzzed incessantly, each vibration ratcheting up the tension. Sarah's name flashed repeatedly on the screen. The first call went to voicemail. Then a second. And a third. By 9:45 a.m., I had 14 missed calls and 23 texts stacked in rapid succession, each one more desperate than the last. The first voicemail, though controlled, carried a hint of confusion. Dave, something really strange is happening with our investors. There's a problem with our funding agreement. I'm sure it's a misunderstanding, but please call me back. My fingers hovered over the dial pad, but I didn't answer. I already knew the reason. 20 minutes later, the second voicemail arrived, noticeably more agitated. Dave, I really need you to call me immediately. The lawyers are saying our primary investor triggered a termination clause. This doesn't make sense. We had ironclad contracts. Call me now. By the third voicemail, Sarah was openly panicked, her voice quivering through the receiver. Dave, please call me back right now. Something terrible is happening. The bank froze all our corporate accounts. They say the investor withdrew authorization for all future transfers. Payroll is today. I don't understand what's going on. Her texts told a story of escalating desperation, professional confusion turning into personal terror. Dave, call me. Urgent business emergency. Something is seriously wrong with funding. The lawyers won't explain the contracts. Please. I'm scared. Someone is deliberately trying to destroy TechFlow. The entire staff is asking questions I can't answer. I know we haven't been close, but I need family right now. This is the worst day of my life. Even Mom called, her voice trembling. Dave, honey, Sarah is crying hysterically. Something devastating happened overnight with her company. The investors pulled out completely with no warning. Do you know anything about business law? Maybe you can help her figure out what went wrong. I shook my head. Honestly, I didn't know. All I knew was the meticulous plan I had executed the night before, terminating the funding agreements to reveal the truth. Then, at 11:35 a.m., Sarah called again. This time, I answered. Her voice was raw, choked with sobs. Oh, thank God you picked up. Something absolutely horrible has happened. Someone completely destroyed my company overnight. I remained calm, trying to anchor the storm. What do you mean destroyed? I asked. She swallowed audibly. The investor, the one who gave us the $40 million, terminated our entire agreement. Just like that. No explanation. No warning. No negotiation. The lawyers are saying there was some clause buried in the contracts that allowed them to withdraw all funding with only 48 hours notice. I listened, sensing the full weight of her panic. That seems unusual, I observed carefully. We went through months of due diligence. Comprehensive legal protections. Guaranteed commitments. How can someone just pull $40 million like that? Her hyperventilating breaths were audible. Exactly. It makes no sense. They just erased everything overnight. I don't understand how anyone can do this to a company, to me. I asked calmly, what exactly did the lawyers say about the termination clause? They said our primary investor, Meridian Holdings, exercised a unilateral termination provision. But Dave, I don't even remember signing anything with them. Our original investor was supposed to be Pinnacle Venture Capital. Maybe Pinnacle works through subsidiaries? Asterisk. I suggested that might be the case. But when I called Pinnacle directly, their response was damning. We've never heard of TechFlow Solutions. Zero records of any investment discussions, no documentation, no contact history. Nothing. Sarah paused. The sound of papers rustling in the background carried her mounting fear. Dave. I think someone has been impersonating legitimate investors this whole time. Fake companies, fake contracts, fake money, and they took it all back just to watch us collapse. Why would anyone do that? I asked. She whimpered. I have no idea. Industrial espionage? A competitor wanting our technology? Someone with a personal vendetta? Lawyers say it could be fraud, but they can't trace Meridian Holdings' ownership structure. By 1:45 p.m., Uncle Robert called. His voice carried authority and concern. Dave, your sister called me about some business disaster. Investors pulled out overnight. Do you know any lawyers who specialize in investment fraud? I could only shake my head. This was beyond ordinary understanding. The illusion that had enthralled the family for months was crumbling. Legitimate venture capital firms didn't vanish $40 million without cause. Yet, here we were, staring into chaos. At 2:30 p.m., Michael Chin, my longtime attorney, confirmed the execution of my plan. Everything executed as instructed. TechFlow's corporate accounts frozen. All funding agreements terminated. Future commitments voided. Miss Sarah Martinez received proper legal notification. No complications. The 48-hour termination clause was fully enforceable. Meridian Holdings dissolved as planned. All documentation sealed for 7 years. The calm efficiency of the process contrasted sharply with the emotional hurricane Sarah was experiencing. She had been deceived into believing in her empire, only to see it evaporate instantly. By early evening, Sarah called one last time. Her voice trembled, weak but seeking connection. Dave, I need to ask you something personal. Last night at dinner, when everyone was laughing about the business exclusion, you seemed calm. Most people would have been angry, hurt, or embarrassed. Why weren't you? I answered simply. I wasn't angry. I understood what was happening. People act based on their insecurities, not you specifically. You were trying to establish respect, not humiliate me. I saw through it, but didn't need to prove anything. Her voice cracked. Do you think this could be karma? The universe punishing me? I smiled inwardly. I don't believe in cosmic justice, Sarah. But if it were karmic retribution, you've learned your lesson. That's enough. She wept again, recounting how she had been manipulated, fake money, fake investors, fake authority, all to humiliate her in front of our family. And for the first time, she admitted the painful truth. She had lied about her background, education, and achievements. MIT, Google AI division, all fabricated. The TechFlow empire was nothing but a brilliant illusion. I stayed silent, letting her sob, absorbing the weight of her confession. This was the collapse of a carefully constructed fantasy, the unmasking of ambition fueled by pride and fear. By the following Tuesday, the family had gathered again, this time not in Sarah's glamorous downtown office, because it no longer existed, but in Mom and Dad's living room. The familiar warmth of the space stood in stark contrast to the tension simmering in the room. Chairs were pulled close, the air thick with anticipation and unease. I took my seat deliberately next to Sarah, as she had requested, instead of the far corner where she had previously banished me. She sat curled on the sofa, wrapped in a faded sweater and worn jeans, her designer wardrobe replaced by a look of exhaustion and vulnerability. Her hair hung loosely around her face, dark circles under her eyes telling of sleepless nights spent agonizing over the collapse of TechFlow Solutions. The glint of pride and superiority she had carried at the Christmas dinner was gone, replaced with raw honesty and fear. "I have some very difficult news to share," Sarah began, her voice fragile, almost a whisper. The room leaned in, waiting, sensing the gravity of what she was about to reveal. TechFlow Solutions no longer exists. A murmur of confusion swept through the family. Uncle Robert frowned, eyebrows knitted together. "What happened?" he asked. Sarah swallowed hard, taking a shaky breath. "Yesterday morning, our investors, all of them, withdrew funding with zero warning. $40 million simply disappeared from our accounts overnight." The shock in the room was palpable. Dad's mouth fell open slightly, Mom clutched her hands together as if bracing for impact. Cousin Marcus leaned forward, eyes wide, processing the impossible news. "How is that legally even possible?" Uncle Robert asked, his voice low but commanding. "There were clauses in the contracts I didn't fully understand when I signed them," Sarah admitted. "The investor had the right to terminate the agreement with just 48 hours notice, for any reason or no reason at all. I signed documents I didn't completely comprehend. I wasn't as smart about business as I pretended to be." Her voice trembled, faltering mid-sentence. Marcus' face twisted in disbelief. "But you showed us those projections, the charts, the growth plans. Pinnacle Venture Capital had done months of due diligence, right? You proved it to us." Sarah shook her head, tears running freely now. "That was the problem. When I contacted Pinnacle directly, they told me they'd never heard of TechFlow Solutions. No records, no meetings, no investments. Someone else, Meridian Holdings, was pretending to be them." Silence hung over the room like a dense fog. Even Mom, usually composed, seemed frozen in shock. "So, all of it was fake?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Sarah nodded, choking back sobs. "Yes. They gave me fake funding, let me build a fake company, and then pulled it all away. It was humiliating. I was made to believe I was important and brilliant, and it was all a lie." Her gaze turned to me, her eyes red and swollen. "Dave, I owe you a massive apology. Everything I said last night about you not being smart enough to participate in family business discussions, that was projection. I was the one who didn't understand anything. You were the only one who never seemed impressed by my so-called success." I looked at her quietly, genuinely. "When did I seem unimpressed?" I asked. "You never asked questions like everyone else did. You never wanted to see the offices, meet the investors. You just listened. Even when people were praising my achievements, you didn't react with excitement or envy. I think part of me knew you could see through my charade, and that scared me. So I excluded you from the meetings because I was afraid of being exposed." I smiled softly. "I thought you were doing well. Honestly, I was happy for your success." "No, you weren't," she whispered. "You were just too kind to embarrass me by pointing out the obvious. You knew something was wrong, but you didn't say anything because you didn't want to hurt my feelings." She looked around the room, addressing everyone now. "I want you all to understand, Dave tried to be supportive, even while I treated him horribly. He congratulated me on achievements that he probably knew were fake. He never undermined me or made me feel stupid, even as I made a complete fool of myself." The room remained silent, absorbing the depth of her confession. Uncle Robert cleared his throat. "Sarah, we all make mistakes. This doesn't change who you are as a person. It changes how you feel about me," she replied, locking eyes with each family member in turn. "The person you've admired for 6 months doesn't exist. I am not a successful entrepreneur. I'm not brilliant with technology. I don't understand venture capital or artificial intelligence. I was completely in over my head and too proud and scared to admit it or ask for help. Mom leaned forward, her voice gentle. "So what happens now, Sarah?" "I need to rebuild my life," she said, voice barely audible but firm. "I need a real job, pay back everyone I borrowed money from while I pretended to be rich, and start over from nothing. Anne. Dave, I owe you a real apology." She reached out and squeezed my hand. "I projected my ignorance onto you. You were never the one who didn't belong in family business meetings." "I was." I nodded slowly. "You're being too hard on yourself," I said softly. "No," she said, voice quivering. "I spent 6 months bragging about money that wasn't mine, expertise I didn't have, and accomplishments that were entirely fictional. The entire time, I treated my own brother like he was too stupid to understand business, when actually, I understood nothing." Finally, she straightened slightly, regaining a fraction of dignity. "Starting now, there are no more contributor requirements for family meetings. Everyone participates equally, regardless of income, education, or job title. Family meetings are for family. Period." Uncle Robert nodded slowly, understanding dawning. Dad and Mom exchanged looks, relieved that honesty had finally replaced pretense. Cousins Marcus and Jenny softened, their admiration for Sarah shifting into empathy. I squeezed her hand again, silently reassuring her. The truth had been revealed. The illusion of tech flow had been shattered. And yet, in the wreckage, there was a chance to rebuild trust, humility, and authenticity. By the end of the session, family members offered various forms of support, job leads, advice, and emotional reassurance. Mom insisted Sarah temporarily move back home to save money while she reconstructed her life. Sarah's posture softened, a glimmer of relief in her eyes as the weight of pretense lifted. Walking me to my car afterward, she paused, looking up at me. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Sure," I said. "How do you stay so calm and patient when people treat you badly? Even when I was cruel about the business meetings, you never got angry or defensive." I thought for a moment. "I try not to take things personally. People act out of their own insecurities. Even when you humiliated me publicly, you weren't trying to hurt me, you were trying to protect your pride and image. I understood that, so I stayed calm." She stopped walking, staring at me with wide eyes. "Dave, you're either the most forgiving person alive, or hiding something significant." I smiled. "I just choose not to play their game." She hugged me fiercely, her relief palpable. "I love you, Dave. I'm so sorry I forgot that for a while." "I love you too," I replied, letting her hold onto that truth. After the family meeting, a heavy but strangely liberating calm settled over the house. The tension that had hung like a dark cloud for months had lifted. Sarah, still visibly shaken, retreated into her room for a long conversation with Mom about logistics, debts, and her next steps. I stayed nearby, quietly observing, reflecting on the precision with which events had unfolded. The chaos of the previous 48 hours had been deliberate but controlled. Every step, every detail, had been orchestrated to reveal the truth, and the fallout was both devastating and instructive. Sarah's first task was facing the tangible consequences of her illusion. She had to contact anyone from whom she had borrowed money, whether formally or informally, and explain that the funds she had claimed to have earned were entirely fabricated. Each call was excruciating. Her voice trembled as she fumbled over explanations, the weight of embarrassment palpable. Cousins, friends, even distant business contacts had to be confronted with the truth. Techflow Solutions was no longer, and the $40 million she had flaunted like a badge of honor had never truly existed in her hands. She leaned heavily on Mom, who provided both emotional and practical support, making lists of debts, deadlines, and obligations that required immediate attention. Meanwhile, I sat in the corner of the living room, laptop open, calmly reviewing my private investment portfolio. The night prior, I had executed a series of precise instructions through my attorney and portfolio manager, systematically terminating funding agreements with Techflow Solutions. Every legal protocol was followed, contracts sealed, corporate accounts frozen, and all future capital commitments voided. The calm efficiency contrasted starkly with Sarah's emotional turmoil, and I couldn't help but feel a quiet sense of satisfaction at how perfectly the plan had been carried out. Once the immediate crises were addressed, Sarah began the painful but necessary process of rebuilding her career. No shortcuts, no pretenses, no glamorous facades, just a return to authenticity. She started by seeking legitimate employment opportunities, reaching out to companies where her real skills could be applied and appreciated. Each application, interview, and networking call was a reminder that success required substance, not appearances. Slowly, she confronted the hard truth. Her achievements at TechFlow were fabricated, and she had to prove her competence through honest, tangible contributions. I supported her quietly, offering guidance only when necessary. I did not boast, intervene, or interfere with her newfound humility. My role was observational and advisory, a silent anchor in the storm. When she expressed doubt about her ability to rebuild, I reminded her gently that every career, every success story, is built on incremental steps and lessons learned. Humility, honesty, and resilience were now her only tools, and she would need them all. The family, too, adjusted to the reality of the situation. Uncle Robert, initially shocked by the collapse, began sharing his network and industry knowledge to help Sarah identify new opportunities. Dad and Mom offered logistical support, from temporary housing to practical financial guidance. Cousins Marcus and Jenny, who had once admired her tech accomplishments, now viewed her with empathy, offering encouragement without judgment. The family's collective support became a safety net, allowing Sarah to confront her mistakes without feeling entirely isolated. Meanwhile, I maintained my routine, working in the warehouse, managing my investments through discrete legal entities, and observing the unfolding consequences of the previous events. I monitored the investment landscape quietly, ensuring that the collapse of TechFlow Solutions had no unintended repercussions on my broader portfolio. Every email, every market analysis, every strategic decision was executed with precision, reflecting a mastery that contrasted sharply with Sarah's visible chaos. Yet, I never flaunted this knowledge. My approach was deliberate: let her rebuild, let her take responsibility, and allow the lessons to resonate fully. Sarah's reflection during this period was profound. She began to understand the psychological mechanics behind her previous behavior, her desire for recognition, the need to impress family and peers, and the fear of vulnerability that had driven her to fabricate an entire corporate persona. Through honest introspection, she realized that the true measure of success was not in perception or accolades but in resilience, authenticity, and the ability to confront one's own limitations. In the evenings, we often discussed these lessons casually over coffee or tea. I listened as she recounted her fears, her moments of doubt, and her realizations about integrity and humility. Sometimes, she asked questions about investment structures or market strategies, but these discussions were exploratory rather than performative. She was genuinely learning, absorbing knowledge that would have been inaccessible had she remained caught in the illusion of TechFlow Solutions. The most important moment of this rebuilding phase occurred when Sarah began to publicly acknowledge her mistakes to the broader world, family, friends, distant relatives, and professional acquaintances. Each confession was a small act of courage, a deliberate step toward authenticity. She posted truthful updates on her professional profiles, contacted collaborators to clarify past misrepresentations, and engaged in honest dialogue about her experience. Every act reinforced the principle that success built on truth, even if slower and less glamorous, was infinitely more sustainable than one constructed on deception. I continued my quiet, supportive role throughout. Sarah learned to navigate her new reality with guidance, but without interference. Her progress was tangible: interview callbacks, offers for legitimate positions, and growing confidence in her own capabilities. The contrast between the artificial empire she had once built and the authentic path she now pursued could not have been more stark. By the end of this phase, the family had also internalized a key lesson: the importance of empathy, oversight, and humility in judging success. They saw that financial achievement and apparent brilliance could be misleading, and that real intelligence often manifests in patience, discretion, and thoughtful action, qualities I had exemplified quietly throughout the crisis. Through this rebuilding process, Sarah developed a profound respect for honesty, diligence, and accountability. The humiliation of losing everything became a crucible for personal growth. She emerged more grounded, less concerned with appearances, and more committed to genuine achievement. Meanwhile, I continued my measured life, quietly managing investments, working the warehouse, and observing the subtle power of strategy, foresight, and patience. My position as the quietly competent brother, once underestimated and excluded, was now firmly established, albeit without the need for recognition or praise. Weeks passed since the family's living room revelation, and a cautious sense of normalcy began to return. Sarah had moved back home temporarily, shedding her designer wardrobe for practical clothing, and immersing herself in honest, everyday work. Gone were the pretense and theatrical displays. In their place, a quiet determination had taken root. The once dazzling illusion of TechFlow solutions had dissolved, but the lessons it left behind were indelible. Each family member adjusted to this new reality, and I maintained my steady routine, the warehouse, investments, and subtle strategic oversight, observing the long-term consequences of the storm we had endured. Sarah's personal and professional transformation became evident in the way she approached her day. Each morning, she researched legitimate companies, polished her real resume, and honed her skills through practical applications rather than fabricated accolades. She had learned the value of authenticity, and the humility required to rebuild a career without shortcuts. Her confidence no longer depended on titles or figures on a graph, but on the quiet mastery of competence, diligence, and integrity. Family dynamics shifted as well. Where once there had been unspoken tension, judgment, and admiration for superficial success, a more genuine sense of connection and support took hold. Uncle Robert offered guidance for Sarah's legitimate business pursuits, while Dad and Mom provided both emotional and logistical backing. Cousins Marcus and Jenny, once caught up in the spectacle of her fake achievements, now respected the courage it took to confront failure and rebuild honestly. The family began to realize that the outward markers of success, high salaries, funding rounds, and flashy presentations were not what defined worth or intelligence. Character, resilience, and ethical integrity did. Meanwhile, I continued my own work with deliberate discretion. The TechFlow collapse had been orchestrated in a way that neutralized potential damage to my investments. I had executed termination orders precisely, ensuring that the $40 million had returned to my primary fund safely and without raising suspicion. This quiet control reflected the difference between superficial confidence and substantive mastery. While Sarah had been immersed in illusion, I had navigated reality with meticulous precision. I never flaunted this. There was no need for validation, only careful observation of the outcomes. The culmination of Sarah's rebuilding journey came during the next family meeting. The air was noticeably lighter than the tension-filled gatherings of the past. This time, there was no hierarchy, no exclusion based on perceived contribution. Everyone, including me, participated equally. Sarah stood before the family, her composure a mixture of humility and quiet authority. "I want to thank you all," she began, voice steady, "for supporting me despite the mistakes I made and the illusions I perpetuated. Losing TechFlow Solutions was devastating, but it forced me to confront my limitations, my pride, and my reliance on appearances rather than substance. I am rebuilding my career honestly, and I hope to prove that real achievement comes from authenticity and dedication." Mom smiled softly, placing a reassuring hand on Sarah's shoulder. "We're proud of you for facing the truth and taking responsibility," she said. Dad nodded, and Uncle Robert's approving glance spoke volumes. Even Marcus and Jenny offered supportive smiles, signaling understanding and respect. I sat quietly, observing, knowing the events of the past weeks had revealed not only Sarah's vulnerabilities but also the subtle strategic patterns that had governed the outcome. By allowing her to experience the consequences of her actions fully, while quietly ensuring that external control remained in my hands, the stage had been set for both personal growth and strategic resolution. Sarah had learned, the family had learned, and I had remained a consistent stabilizing force, unseen, underestimated, yet fundamentally essential. Later, Sarah and I had a private conversation, the weight of recent events lingering in the room. "Dave," she said, voice tinged with emotion, "I can't thank you enough. You didn't intervene, you didn't embarrass me further, but you ensured the right outcomes. I owe you more than I can ever express. I smiled gently. You've learned your lessons, Sarah. That's what matters. The rest will follow naturally if you stay honest, diligent, and patient. She nodded slowly, a trace of tears in her eyes. I understand now. Success isn't about perception. It's about substance, integrity, and the ability to face consequences. The metaphor of rising tides applied to the family in a subtle but profound way. Sarah's rebuilding affected everyone. The family matured in understanding, empathy, and wisdom. Her failures became teaching moments, and my quiet interventions ensured stability and security. The $40 million that had once seemed the pinnacle of achievement was irrelevant compared to the lessons learned, the trust regained, and the authentic connections restored. Weeks turned into months, and Sarah eventually secured a legitimate position in a mid-sized technology firm, her responsibilities real and her contributions tangible. She built a reputation not as the brilliant entrepreneur she had once pretended to be, but as a competent, reliable professional who understood her limitations and leveraged her strengths. Every success, no matter how small, was earned through effort, reflection, and honesty. Meanwhile, the family's perception of intelligence, achievement, and contribution shifted dramatically. They began to value patience, discretion, and strategic thinking over flashy displays. My own quiet mastery, once invisible, now acknowledged subtly, became a model of competence that did not require admiration, only effectiveness. In reflecting on the sequence of events, it became clear that the real victory was not financial. It was relational, emotional, and strategic. Sarah learned humility and responsibility. The family learned empathy, discernment, and the difference between perception and reality. I maintained control and oversight without interference, demonstrating the power of measured action and strategic foresight. By the time the next holiday gathering rolled around, there was laughter again at the dinner table, but it was unforced, genuine. Sarah sat beside me, sharing stories of her new role, her confidence rebuilt on a foundation of honesty. Mom and Dad listened proudly. Uncle Robert offered advice for future endeavors, while Marcus and Jenny engaged in conversation without judgment. The family had been through a crucible of ego, ambition, and deception, and emerged with deeper understanding and unity. As I glanced around the table, I recognized the subtle symmetry of it all. Outward appearances of success were fleeting, but the quiet, steady cultivation of knowledge, strategy, and emotional intelligence endured. The $40 million that had vanished overnight was irrelevant. The lessons learned were priceless. The family had survived the storm, Sarah had rebuilt her life, and I had ensured that balance and fairness prevailed without the need for spectacle. The final, enduring truth was simple. Life rewards those who act with foresight, integrity, and patience. Those who chase appearances over substance may experience fleeting admiration, but only those grounded in reality can withstand the inevitable storms. Sarah had learned this the hard way. The family had witnessed it firsthand, and I had silently orchestrated a resolution that balanced accountability, empathy, and strategic mastery. As I drove home that evening through quiet suburban streets, the reflection was clear. Genuine success, authentic relationships, and unshakable foresight were worth far more than any fabricated fortune. The family had reconciled, Sarah had rebuilt, and I remained a quiet architect of both stability and justice, the unnoticed hand ensuring that truth, not illusion, prevailed.